Passion. You have to find your passion. That one thing in life that makes you feel fulfilled. That one thing that really gives it a purpose. The only problem is, I can't seem to find mine, and I know many other people can't seem to find theirs either. I've tried many different things, and I've enjoyed them for sure, but I've never had that moment where it feels like obvious that this is the thing I was meant to do. This is the thing that makes me feel happy. And it's weird because the world seems to put this pressure on you, like you're meant to have already found it by now, or at least that's how it seems to me. And it makes me think, has everyone else found it? Am I falling behind because I haven't found the thing that I really, truly enjoy, the thing that I'm truly passionate about? But because passion is portrayed as a sort of effortless motivation, a constant sense of meaning, a sort of flash, when I don't feel that, I'm kind of left feeling like maybe I'm just not one of those people. And the truth is, it doesn't really feel good because I want to be passionate about something. And it kind of left me wondering that maybe passion isn't something you discover in yourself, it's something you actually have to create. And I started thinking that because I read this book by Peter Green on Alexander the Great. And it was amazing, and it made me see, at least what I thought, what passion can look like. And I really admired him a lot through the book, Alexander the Great, that is. And as much as I admired him, the book made me feel kind of sad because it made me extremely aware of my own shortcomings, especially at this age. As I read the book, I was just absolutely amazed by this guy. It felt like I was reading a Greek epic, but the craziest part was it was actually real. You know, he existed, he actually did these things. You've probably heard it a million times by now, but when Alexander was in his 30s, he had already conquered land stretching from Greece to India. However, one moment in particular really stood out to me, and that was the siege of Tyre, or Tyre. I think it might be French, so I don't know how to pronounce that. But essentially, Tyre was this island fortress in the Mediterranean. When Alexander was on his campaigns, he asked Tyre if he could sacrifice at a temple in the city. They suggested he use the temple on the mainland, which led to some negotiations, but ultimately they refused. Obviously this pissed him off quite a bit. So he wanted to take the city. But this was not just any fortress. This island was extremely hard to assault, with walls jutting up from the sea. However, that's when Alexander did one of the most incredible things I have ever heard. Yes, he did siege an island fortress, and later he did take it, but it was how he did it. As I said, Tyre was an island, and the way he got to Tyre was by constructing a causeway all the way out to the city, which stretched nearly 1 kilometre into the sea, literally changing geography in the process, so much so that Tyre is still today connected to the Asian continent by land. No longer an island, but a peninsula. And to me, that was it. That was what passion looked like. Audacious, unstoppable. Essentially superhuman, really. However, as I read on, over a series of multiple events, this passion, which seemed like a superpower, soon actually resembled a bit of a curse, really. After about 8 years on this campaign filled with victories, Alexander came to his furthest point, the Hyphases, or the Hyphasis. I'm, again, not exactly sure how to pronounce that. His army had been through some brutal fighting and terrain, and at this point, they wanted to return home. But Alexander just wanted to keep on pushing forward. Eventually, after much rage and anger, seeing his army was against him, he agreed to turn back. However, always looking to satisfy his desire for fame, he took this journey as an opportunity. Despite the army's clear drained morale, he brought them back home on the most brutal march they had done during the entire campaign. He brought them through the Gogh desert. By reading further, I realised what can happen when this unconquerable drive becomes a dooming obsession. I realised that his ambition had stopped being a catalyst and had actually become destructive. Shortly after this journey, in 323 BC in Babylon, Alexander would die at the young age of 32 years old. The exact cause isn't known. Some say he was poisoned, others say he died of natural causes. But just like him, the empire he fought with all his heart to create would die young and crumble. So what would have happened if Alexander consolidated what he had conquered rather than chasing the next bit of land? Would the empire have grown larger, stronger, and more resilient? It seems to me now that his passion is essentially what destroyed his efforts. He built a great empire which fizzled out because he couldn't control his desires and be patient. Despite this, I still felt jealous that he had a clear direction and the path essentially laid out for him by his goals. I felt very inspired, but at the same time very empty due to my own lack of achievements. I was very aware of the fact that I didn't know what I wanted, and worse yet, I hadn't even asked myself if that was the kind of person I wanted to become. The book left me thinking for quite a while, longer than I expected, and evaluating my own life. I thought I was just reading about Alexander the Great, but before I knew it, I was asking myself the same question I had asked myself for years. What was my passion, and where will I find it? But the question was even more fundamental now. I was actually just wondering what a passion even was. Did I have to want to conquer the world like Alexander, become a billionaire, maybe a top athlete? Well, eventually I just decided to search what the word actually meant. And it turns out it wasn't what I thought it meant, at least not initially. Passion didn't start out meaning something you love or feel excited about doing like I expected. In English, it first shows up around the year 1200, and it was actually a religious word. It meant the sufferings and death of Christ, which is exactly why we still say today, the Passion of Christ. The word comes through Old French from late Latin, and I am going to mess up these pronunciations, but it was the word passio, meaning suffering or enduring. This comes from the Latin verb pati, meaning to suffer, to endure, or to undergo. Old English even had its own word for this, and I'm going to mess up these pronunciations even more, but the word was belung. It came from the word bolian, or to endure. But over time, passion replaced that word. And it goes even further than that. Patient and patience comes from the same Latin root as passion. Patience shows up in English around the year 1200 as well, meaning a calm endurance of hardship, literally the quality of suffering. Even the word patient starts out meaning a suffering person, someone enduring something. So, in the original sense, passion isn't a burning feeling that carries you. It's more like a capacity, what you can bear, what you can endure, what you're willing to go through. Over time, the word does grow into our modern meaning, of course. It starts as suffering, but by the late 1300s, it's also used for intense emotion or desire, not just Christ's passion. By the 1500s, you even get passion used for romantic or sexual love, and by the 1600s, it lands on the meaning we use all the time now, a strong liking and an enthusiasm. So the modern version isn't wrong, at least not necessarily, but to me it just feels incomplete. It kept the excitement and enjoyable aspect of the word, but quietly dropped the price tag, the suffering and endurance required for the passion. So by tracing back to the roots of the word, I started realizing that maybe passion isn't something you discover, a love that you're born with. Maybe passion is just something you can't live without, something that you will endure anything to experience, and when it's not present in your life, you're suffering. Maybe Alexander was experiencing true passion, something which was so alien to me that it seemed wrong or bad or damaging. But then I read further and I realised that this was where something I call the romantic trap starts. When people say passion, I think a lot of us picture this. Van Gogh, the ultimate symbol of the tortured genius. He is inseparable from the image of the struggling artist wrestling and toiling in order to express themselves. He embodies the romantic trap, the idea that if it hurts, it must be meaningful, whereas if you're calm and cheery, you must not care about it. It's an attractive story. Truth be told, many of us yearn to be the image of the pained intellectual who the world just doesn't understand. Poverty, breakdown, self-mutilation and suicide, all brutal and horrible, but deep down, though people don't want to admit it, to many of us this can be strangely appealing. Some of you may even be familiar with one of his quotes which says, "I would prefer to die of passion than to die of boredom." But the issue with this quote is that in the letter in which he wrote this, he was actually quoting from someone else. So even the most iconic image of insatiable passion It's part of a bigger romantic script which we culturally inherit from. So, is this truly what Van Gogh thought about passion? In another letter, he says his ambition is based more on a feeling of serenity than on passion, and it is here where he's not talking like a tortured genius. Instead, he's talking like Sisyphus, a man who had to come to accept that it is endurance which keeps him going, and he's not even sure why, but he has learnt to accept it calmly and keep going anyway. Van Gogh makes it feel like passion is pain, therefore pain equals passion, something which the etymology seems to support, and as does Alexander. But this is the trap I'm speaking about, because enduring something doesn't necessarily mean self-destruction. Pain can be a cost, but it doesn't have to be the goal. So I asked myself, to be passionate about something, is that how far I have to be willing to go? Do I have to be willing to cut off my own ear for it? Do I have to be willing to march through the desert in a frenzy for it? Ultimately, does all passion have to lead you to a slightly tragic, albeit beautiful, ending? And that's when I found someone who showed a completely different side of passion. Beethoven. Because if Van Gogh makes you think passion is proven by pain, Beethoven shows something else. Not pain as an identity, but pain as a cost of working through constraint, enduring the struggle for the pursuit of something greater. Of course, we all know Beethoven's passion was music, but by around 1798, he had started losing his hearing, which continued to gradually decline through the years, and he became almost entirely deaf by 1815, in just his mid-40s. Prior to this, on the 6th of October 1802, Beethoven wrote a letter to his brother, and this letter is known as the Heiligenstadt Testament. Ignore the pronunciation. It's not a polished inspirational speech or letter beautifully prepared for the public. The letter was supposed to be private. It's raw, isolated, and he's admitting how close he is to giving up in the despair of the loss of his hearing. He's wrestling with himself. The sentiment of the letter is one of feeling hopeless, so what can one do in a moment like this? Well, we've looked at the original meaning of the word passion and seen two examples of it taken to the extreme, so is the best option to follow what that has shown? Maybe act in torment, potentially blind himself to show his dedication to his music, become the self-mutilating, tortured prodigy who stays up all night in order to play and forces orchestras to play all day and all night long and forces them to hate him at some point? No, that isn't what he does at all. Instead, he follows the true meaning of the word passion, the patient endurance despite the struggle. He keeps going, calmly and steadily. Of course there's mental strife and physical anguish that comes with this, but the difference is that Beethoven was never tricked by the illusion that pain is passion. He never voluntarily placed a struggle upon himself. Instead, it was unwillingly thrust upon him, but he kept going anyway. He carried on. That is passion, and that is love, and that is the example we should follow. Beethoven fought with his music. It wasn't all enjoyment like people seem to think in the modern sense, but it also wasn't just misery and despair like is shown in the romantic vision. It was instead one of balance, endurance, and consistency, despite the external circumstances. If we look back at the Heiligenstadt Testament, Beethoven says himself that he must keep going, because he can't stand the idea of leaving the world before bringing out what he knows he's capable of. He doesn't want a sad ending to prove his devotion. He wants to make a beautiful symphony that affirms life. He created his own purpose. His purpose was to make music. This wasn't something he was born with, it was something he fought for, and now he was going to have to fight to make it a lasting legacy. And because of this, Beethoven's music outlives the pain. The beautiful music he produced is remembered before the pain is even considered. On May 7th, 1824, the Ninth Symphony premieres in Vienna. Beethoven is on stage, but the performance is led by others, because he is nearly completely deaf at this point. He can't even hear the crowd's reaction to his music, but he can see it. By the time the finale of his symphony comes round, Beethoven doesn't give us a pitiful plea. he shows us a clear decision he has made. The music starts off turbulent, it goes back and forth, almost arguing with itself, and it continues to fight through the composition. But eventually, it rejects the music which has come before. It rejects the turbulence, and then a voice breaks in through the instruments with Beethoven's own words. "O friends, not these sounds, instead let's strike up more pleasing ones and more joyful ones." Then comes Schiller's Ode to Joy, a poem calling on joy to heal divisions and promote brotherhood. A vision where the point isn't the solo genius, it's humanity together. And that's the decision Beethoven made. His struggle was real, but it doesn't get the final word. The final word is joy. Looking back, I realised Alexander shows the sheer power of being ambitious. He shows the success and failures of having a passion. Van Gogh shows how we romanticize suffering and confuse pain for meaning. However, Beethoven shows a subtler definition, one of patience, endurance through struggle, and a beautiful output. In the past, I've been viewing passion as though it is one thing that shows up in one way for all humans. A hobby or interest you are just absolutely obsessed with, and it brings nothing but joy. But that is clearly not the case. From what I have seen, there appears to be a sort of life-building passion, where the pursuit can very much be a struggle you must accept, but the activity makes you more capable, strengthens you, and empowers you over time, and in the end, you produce something which affirms your reason to live. But then, there is the life-consuming and self-destructive passion, one in which pain becomes the purpose as it shows your devotion. Everything else in your life takes a back seat, as the more you sacrifice, the more you show your love. It appears to me that there's room for both definitions, so there's no denying that Alexander had passion, but it's the life-consuming kind. Not necessarily wrong, but definitely dangerous. It feels like the life-consuming kind is one in which you perhaps don't go as far as you could have otherwise. It feels as though the aspects of your life which get ignored eventually catch up with you, whether it's disease, depression, or self-neglect. Eventually, they bring you to your end. So I suppose this is how I would define passion. A pursuit you voluntarily choose and endure with despite any struggle and regardless of enjoyment in order to achieve a meaningful output to you. Of course, enjoyment can be part of it, but it's not the foundation. Instead, it is what you are willing to persist with. The reason I felt empty after reading about Alexander is I mistook intensity for healthy motivation. I wasn't jealous of his achievements. I don't need to be a conqueror or rule the world, nor do I want to. I was just jealous that he could wake up each day and know what he wanted out of life. I was jealous of his certainty and jealous of his direction. After researching all of this, the truth is I'm not magically cured. I still feel quite lost, but the fog has slightly lifted now. I've moved on from asking myself what do I love, and instead I know the question should be, what ending am I willing to endure for? So perhaps to find your passion, you don't have to pick something you love doing. Instead, pick something which has an output or ending you would be most proud to achieve. For example, having a published book, acting in a movie, winning a fight in a martial art, the list goes on. Perhaps you don't even have to like the process, but if you are willing to go through it, stick with it, and come out the other side, maybe then you will see that you have developed a passion. Maybe then you will even learn to love the process. And maybe then, despite the pain the world inflicts upon you, you will have a purpose which keeps you moving forward each and every day.